Welcome back. For the Saturday one, it's a bit of a change. I was planning on doing a different video, but I'm going to do a run through of the 2022 ACER Gamsat information booklet. They've updated their website overnight. Actually, if you haven't already caught it, I posted it on my Instagram as well. They put some kind of funky colors on there and stuff. With the new booklet, there's actually a couple of changes that they've made to the test. So what we're going to do is basically just do a quick breakdown of the changes as well as the general structure of things that aren't changing as well. So that for those of you who are sitting in March, you know what to expect and also what changes are being made. I've got it here anyway. So you can see they've kind of updated the homepage. They've gotten rid of that really kind of blood red color, which was always a little bit too intense in my opinion. They've gone for this nice pink purple kind of mauve lavender kind of theme here. So it looks like they're still yet to open up registrations for March 2022. It just says early November because ACER will never give us a concrete date or anything on anything. We can expect that should open probably from Monday. Probably also gives a bit of a clue that maybe results are almost ready to release for the September ones if you're waiting on results there. They did say mid-November though, so expect it could be another week or a week and a half or so. I'm no guru on that. All of the preparation material looks to be completely unchanged, which is a little bit disappointing. I was hoping to see that they might release a new practice test or at least a new set of questions and things, but that doesn't look to be changing in any way. Yeah, the dates and everything are in there as well. So what we'll do, let's just go through the actual booklet here. And I might just zoom this out a little bit. So let's see. So first of all, just kind of running through the important information at the top. I'll try to make this pretty brief because I know that you could obviously read it on your own. I'll just pull out the key stuff. None of this has really changed at all. I'm not 100% if you're watching from like the UK or Ireland. I don't know if there's any changes there, so I haven't really followed any of the details, as you could imagine. But so it's best to just double check that. But for at least people in Australia, it doesn't look like there's been any changes to the test centres. Yeah, so early November registration opens, pretty much the same timeline as what we had last year. And for the March sitting. Registrations close around about the same time. They've got all their late registrations and their ridiculous fees and everything else as well. So nothing seems to have really changed there in any way. And they're now saying late May. I think they said mid-May last time, which confused a lot of people. And so now late May is going to be for the results release, probably after their little debacle. So it's a lot of junk in there, but look, most of it is pretty much the same. You can contact them if you want. And then about information. On my morning runs, I usually run past the Gamsat or the ACER office, and I'm always tempted just to kind of kick the sign or something, just for my own personal satisfaction. But anyway, so here's the first change. We've got the structure of the actual test. Still the 3 sections as normal, but section 1 they've now increased. So it was 47 questions in 70 minutes. It's now 62 questions in 100 minutes with 8 minutes reading time, 92 minutes writing. Although they say that reading time is incorporated into writing time, so I don't know why they bother with that. I guess that's just a suggested reading time. Really, you'll just have 100 minutes. You'll be able to start answering questions as soon as that 100 minutes starts. So what that means is that the pacing has actually lessened a little bit. It's slowed down. So I forgot the numbers. I think it's 1.48 to 1.6 or something per question. Whereas now we've got 100 minutes to answer 62 questions. So we get 1.6. We've gotten an extra second or two per question. It's pretty much exactly the same. So I'd imagine that they're probably still adjusting the kind of combo a little bit as they move into this now computer test era. So they've definitely eased up with the computer test, but that's probably to allow for scrolling and things as well, because with the paper test, as much as it was annoying to have to flip, you were able to highlight, you were able to annotate. It was a lot quicker to flip a page and check back compared to having to scroll on a screen, although they do their best to try and keep everything on screen at once. So they've probably made some adjustments there in that way. Section 2, there's no changes there. So you've got 65 minutes, 5 minutes reading/planning time, and 60 minutes writing time. But again, it's all combined. And then 150 minutes as usual with suggested reading time for section 3. And it's still the 75 questions. So 2 minutes per question. Nothing else has changed there. I'd imagine that's partly based off of the feedback and the kind of data that they collected from the 2020 and 2021 sittings so far. They've probably recognized that the it was maybe a little bit too difficult to do the 47 questions, or they needed more questions to help separate the crowd. We do know that the scores have kind of trended upwards since COVID and since the changes on the test structure. So that may have been making section 1 a little bit too easy, in that it was harder for them to separate the crowd and too many people were scoring up the top end. So they've probably lengthened it, hoping that, you know, stamina and consistency is going to help become a driving factor behind kind of separating the top end of the cohort. So all of this, they're just kind of running through the general structure. None of that has changed. A lot of it is copy paste from the previous information booklet. I will say though, they've given a little bit more detail here for the criteria on written communication. They used to just say thought and content, the quality of what is said and the quality of the structure. They've now actually given us a little bit more in the thought and content, and it says what is made of and developed from the task. It's still classic vagueness from ASA, but it's a little bit more helpful. And the kinds of thoughts offered in response to the task. So this would mean that, you know, if you're offering something that is a little bit more considered, more well-rounded, and unique, and niche is also fine as well, then I would imagine that that would do pretty well. Don't quote me on that, because like I'm not ASA, I have no inside information or anything, but looking at that and what I've kind of learnt in my own practice and things, it matches in with everything else they've said, and at least they've given us a little bit more detail on that side. Organization and expression, that's all the same language that they used previously. So the shape and the form of the piece, making sure that it's well structured, it's logically organized, it's paragraphed well, and then the effectiveness and fluency of the language. So brevity is actually a real strength in the writing. We've known that you don't have to write lengthy, detailed essays to score well. I think I wrote 1,100 words across both of mine, and I think about 800 of it was in my first one, and the second one was about 300 words. I've also done practice ones that were 400 words each, and they still scored pretty well. So clearly it's about the quality of what is being said rather than the quantity of what is being said. And people have also found success quite commonly in the 2-paragraph structure rather than doing the classic 3. Outside of that, everything else, they've kept the balance the same, 40-40-20 between chemistry, bio, and physics. People have been saying that physics is becoming more and more prominent. I don't really agree with that. I think that people probably find the physics stuff a little bit more challenging, so it maybe just absorbs their focus a little bit more, and coming out of the test, you're going to focus on the questions that you found more challenging because they're the ones that frustrate you because you wanted to go in and do well. So I think people probably, it may be hyperbolizing, or at least kind of amplifying the actual relative size or the relative contribution of physics questions, because I can't imagine that an organization like ASA, they do have a very, very strict policy. Realistically, they're not going to be quoting 40-40-20 and then not following that, like being wildly off. I think there's a lot of maths in there, but you'll notice that maths is not actually a key focus or a key point that they try to create a particular distribution on. They instead just say that it relies on maths. So you can see up here, so stimulus material is presented just here. Stimulus material is presented in a variety of formats, including text, mathematical, graphs, tables, diagrams. So maths can present itself across all 3 of the disciplines. Of course, it's going to be much more suited to physics, but we can see it in bio, we can see it in chemistry as well. So maths is definitely becoming perhaps a trend where there's a lot more mathematical reasoning, but it doesn't mean that it's becoming a maths test. It is still ultimately going to be balanced across the 3, with maths as a skill that can kind of bleed into all 3 of them. Outside of that, this is actually quite a helpful paragraph as well if you haven't already read this before and you're looking for how to improve. So in terms of anticipating questions and question styles, the skills assessed include the ability to identify knowledge in new contexts. So that is the idea that they're going to throw you stuff that you're not familiar with, and that's perfectly okay. It's just about taking on and absorbing new information. Analyze and interpret data. We see that all the time, graphs, tables, making conclusions. Relationships, that can be mathematical relationships. And then translating knowledge from one form to another, so relating it to something that is similar. And then as well as that, deduction skills, consequences from models, follow and evaluate a line of reasoning. Those are the trickiest because you've got to kind of get onto that line of reasoning. And then evaluate evidence, categorize and select information, generate and apply strategies to solve problems. That's a pretty big one as well. Make comparisons. That's usually the easier level questions. Extrapolate and interpolate data. So you might create a linear association between them in your head and then roughly use that to extrapolate. And then estimate and recognize limits in accuracy, where we start now seeing questions that analyze the accuracy of a particular experimental design procedure, and you're looking for the potential for errors or the potential for failures in consistency or reliability or precision and that kind of thing. So they're still saying same level of difficulty. First year science, so first year biology and chemistry, and year 12 level physics or equivalent in the UK and that kind of thing. And then it also says here, watch out for that. Section 2, they do plagiarism checkers. So anyone going in with pre-prepared essays that they've copied from somewhere on the internet or from a previously submitted essay, I'd imagine they do the same thing on all of the automated scorer thing as well. They're probably putting all that into a log and then keeping all that to make sure that people aren't sharing essays and trying to regurgitate them or regurgitating your own essays that you know have worked. So it's got to be an original piece, and truthfully you'd be working against yourself if you're focusing on that. Make sure you're just focusing on always writing new original pieces every single week, which is what we'll do in the Write With Me series anyway. So all this stuff, none of this has changed, right? Like, I won't bother with any of that. It's pretty boring. Registrations we saw before. September, if you're looking to sit later in the year, mid-May, same timeline as usual. The registration process is the same, and we can see here as well, late registrations are all the same. The bit that I was most interested in was, have they put the price up again? Luckily they have not. So still $515 Australian, 341 euros there, or 268 British pounds. That is still a lot of money. And it's a real shame that they put the price quite that high. So be it. I mean, look, they've been raising it. I think when I first sat it in 2012, it might have been $495 or so. I think it was $495 or $490. So it has climbed here and there, and they usually go up by $5 increments from what I've seen. But good to see that they've not raised it anymore, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 2023 it goes to $520 or $525. So refunds, they've got pretty strict refund rules on their stuff as well. I won't bore you with that because it's all the same stuff. You can kind of read through it for yourself. Nothing's changed anyway. And all the details on deferring and that, we don't really need to look at that right now because it's still a long way away. Preparing for Gamsat, so yeah, all their preparation materials, all still the same. It looks practice test, 1, 2, 3, sample questions, and the practice questions, same pricing, so I'd imagine it's all the same stuff. They're all ebooks still as well. And then they've also still got their automatic scorer, and it doesn't look like they've changed that either. It looks like it still does test 1 and test 2, so they've probably also not changed the prompts, which will be interesting to see. They've kept the price the same, $15, which I think is pretty fair, to be honest. The downside is you don't get detailed feedback or like personalized feedback. You just get a score band, but it is nice that it's immediate. I found that it was pretty accurate, so I think for $15 it's not too bad, and you can space that out if you want to do a few of them. All the rules around scrap paper doesn't seem to have changed in any way, and they obviously give test taking strategies, but really it's pretty personal. One thing that has changed is the previous testing window was slightly longer. I think actually it was the 17th to the 31st of March from memory. And so that was effectively a full 2-week period. They've now cut this down to the 18th to the 23rd, which is interesting. I would imagine that would be down to capacity limits being removed, because we sat it in groups of, it was hard to gauge, but probably maybe 150 people, 200 people to a session. So they're probably getting 300-400 people a day. Because there were a couple of rooms as well. They're probably 400, maybe 500 people across the day, across the AM and the PM sessions. But they've massively cut that down to what looks like, 6 days, 18, 19, 20, 6 days instead. So they're looking to pump it out a little bit quicker, probably lowering their costs because they've got to hire out the venues now, because they do them all through the Clifton Convention buildings in the city, at least in Melbourne and around some of the other capital cities. So they've cut that down. I don't know whether or not that shouldn't have any impact on, I guess, like the capacity or the number limits or anything, but I would probably recommend registering early if you want to get in. I know I registered early last time, as pretty much as soon as registration opened. I was registering for it because I knew that there was the potential for places to run out given it was limited by capacity. And so I'd probably still say with a computer test and having to book their own venues ahead of time, that I'd probably book early if you definitely want to get a seat, because I wouldn't be relying on it still being there later on. All the rest of it, all the same. Test tickets will be released. They usually get released about 3 to 4 weeks before. Same stuff of what to bring on the day: ID, your test ticket, pens, pencils, eraser, clear bottle, they make you put that on the side anyway. So unless you want to get up and down all tests, there's really no point in bringing a water bottle in. Watches, they're allowed to be analog. They have to be put on the desk, although I wouldn't be surprised if they make you put that on the side as well. And then smartwatches aren't allowed at all, right? And you have to have all alarms and things on watches turned off. Results timeline is the same. Gamsat score calculation is all the same. And then they just have all of the individual processes for the individual universities. So I won't bother with any of that. They've just got all the contact information. And then all the contact information for all the unis in the UK and in Ireland. And that's pretty much it. Looks like they've still got some COVID vaccination processes, so you probably have to be double vaccinated. I didn't look at this bit. So they're going under government ruling. They pretty much have to. So anywhere where it's required, so in Melbourne at least, it pretty much is mandated in all commercial settings, you need to be double vaccinated. So we'll see that in the Gamsat. If you're unwell, don't come. So all the same rules that we had this year. In terms of if you've got symptoms, you probably need to turn a negative test or something, or if you're awaiting a test. Yep. Then blah, 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 blah. Test setup. Let's have a look at this actually. Test rooms and any associated breakout areas have been adapted. That's all the same actually. They're running it exactly the same way. Hand sanitization, frequent cleaning, blah, 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 blah. All the same stuff there. Must follow the rules. Should wear a face mask indoors. Okay. Strongly recommended, even if it's not government mandated. So they're going to keep the masks on during the test again. I didn't find that too distracting. Some people that I knew that sat it in September in 2020 found it really distracting to have the mask on indoors. But I didn't find it all that bad. Maybe it's just something that you get used to over time. We've spent 2 years with them now. And all this is just a declaration that you agree to all their mumbo-jumbo rules. So we don't really care much about that. There we go. And you can contact them if you want, but they're usually pretty slow to reply. But look, I won't rip into them too much. That's pretty much it. Biggest things are going to be test date. Now the window's shortened, probably bigger groups of people at a time. And then section 1, they're increasing that. Pacing is pretty much exactly the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see it stretch all the way back to 75 questions in 110 minutes. They're probably also doing that because now that they've got more people that they can get through the door in a day, they can probably get away with longer test sessions. Whereas before they were limited within their hours to get 2 done, pump them out and do that over the course of 2 weeks. Now that there's greater capacity limits at the venue, they're probably also they probably always had this in planning, to be honest, to increase it so that they can run something closer to the old test structure with a much, much longer day that should run a lot more efficiently than the paper test, so that way then they can get back to it and they're not limited by any COVID restrictions or anything. Will hopefully, even with a longer test, shouldn't really affect the actual timeline of the day or the efficiency of the running. I will hand it to them. They ran it very, very efficiently. It was in, out, barely waiting around at all. Might be a little bit longer with bigger groups, but you compare that to the old paper test. That was a 5.5 hour writing time, 6 hours total if you factor in the reading time. And then we had physical, actual reading time in those. And that was a 6 hour day, but it would turn into a 10 to 12 hour day. Because I remember I sat mine in Melbourne at the Flemington Showgrounds and it was 2 hours just to get everyone in the door and seated, and another 2 hours to get, or thereabouts, to get everyone out the door, 2 hours back in, 2 hours back out at the end. So that's an extra 6 hours there. So it would go 6 to 12 hours or so. I remember getting there at 6, I think I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning and I was leaving at about 6 o'clock at night, I think, roughly on both times. And it was a nightmare to get out of the car park because everyone was either catching the tram or driving, and there were only a couple of exits. So be glad that you don't have to go through that chaos anymore. I'm definitely glad that I didn't have to go through that this time around in March. So yeah, it should run pretty smoothly, but those are the major changes. We'll wait then and see what the GEMSAS application guide says in terms of whether or not there's any changes to entry schemes for all the different universities. Obviously, the one that I'm watching really closely is the Sydney one. I'm nervously hoping that they're not going to reintroduce interviews or anything. It doesn't look like they will, but I'm also hoping that they don't go scrapping the Gamsat only thing and start bringing back GPA limits and stuff like that, because that is what I'm kind of banking on at the moment, is a strong Gamsat score. So we'll see what happens with that, but that's a while away yet. That should release, I think, around March or April or something. I think it releases. Can't remember exactly the timeline on that one. But yeah, anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. I wanted to keep this relatively brief, a quick rundown so that you know what's happening with it all. And I will probably let everyone know when registration opens as well. So probably best on my Instagram. Not many people are onto that. I don't really post all that often on there, but if I do, it should be useful. It's either behind the scenes type stuff, updates on what I'm doing, or probably news like this, for example, where there's not really a point in me making an entire video just to say, hey, the registration's open, go and register now. But this one, we can do a breakdown on this, so hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Yeah.